Mrs. Peters was known everywhere as a woman of strength. Long before wealth came into her life, she had known hunger, pain, and the bitterness of being forgotten by the world. As a young girl, she had walked miles barefoot to school, often studying by candlelight because there was no electricity in their tiny home. But through all those years, one thing never left her heart: her faith in God. When she finally became successful through years of hard work and determination, she made a promise to herself. "My children will never suffer the way I did." She worked day and night, building businesses, investing wisely, and saving every dollar she could. Over the years, her hard work paid off. Mrs. Peters became a very wealthy woman. But money was never what she cared about the most. Her greatest desire was that her children would know God. Every morning before school, she gathered them in the living room. They prayed together. They read the Bible. They sang worship songs. Her daughter Grace loved those moments. Even as a little girl, she listened carefully to every word her mother said about faith, patience, and trusting God in every situation. But her two sons, Michael and Daniel, were different. As they grew older, they became more interested in money, business, and comfort. They respected their mother, but they quietly believed that success came from hard work, not faith. Grace, however, believed every word her mother had taught her. And soon, that faith would be tested in the most painful way. One rainy evening, everything changed. Mrs. Peters was driving home from a business meeting when a truck lost control on the highway. The crash was terrible. Her car was crushed. An ambulance rushed her to the hospital, and doctors fought for hours to save her life. When her children arrived at the hospital, the doctor's face told them everything before he even spoke. "She's alive," he said slowly, "but she is in a coma." Grace felt the world spin around her. Michael clenched his fists. Daniel stared silently at the floor. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Mrs. Peters never woke up. Machines surrounded her bed. Tubes and monitors kept her alive. The once strong woman who had built an empire now lay still and silent. Grace visited every single day. She sat beside the bed and held her mother's hand. She told her stories about her childhood. She reminded her of their morning prayers. Sometimes she sang the same worship songs they used to sing together. And every night she prayed, "God, you said with you, all things are possible. I know my mother can hear me. Please bring her back." But outside the room, things were changing. Hospital bills were growing larger. Michael and Daniel began having quiet conversations with the doctors. One afternoon, the doctor called the three siblings into his office. He looked serious. "We have done everything medically possible," he said gently. "Your mother's brain activity is extremely low. After months in a coma, the chances of recovery are almost impossible." Grace's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" she whispered. The doctor sighed. "You may need to consider removing life support." The room fell silent. Michael nodded slowly. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "It's been months," Michael said. "The doctor said she won't make it." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "You want to kill our mother?" Daniel spoke softly but firmly. "Grace, we're not killing her. We're just letting go." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "No." Michael sighed impatiently. "Grace, this hospital bill is getting ridiculous. The doctor said she won't recover." Grace stood up suddenly. "I don't care about the money." Michael's voice rose. "Well, someone has to. Do you know how much this is costing?" Grace looked directly into his eyes. "That money belongs to our mother. She worked her whole life for it. If it takes every dollar she has to keep her alive, then so be it. Daniel shook his head. You're being emotional. Grace's voice trembled, but remained strong. No, I'm being faithful. Michael slammed his hand on the table. The doctor said she'll never wake up. Grace's tears rolled down her cheeks. Doctors are not God. The room became quiet again. Grace wiped her tears and spoke with determination. I am the first child, and over my dead body will anyone remove my mother's life support. Neither brother spoke. They were furious. But legally, she had the authority, and she refused to give up. From that day forward, Grace fought a quiet battle. Every morning she fasted. Every evening she prayed. And every night she sat beside her mother's hospital bed. Sometimes she laughed while telling stories. Sometimes she cried while holding her mother's hand. But she never stopped believing. Nurses often watched her with pity. Some whispered among themselves, "That poor girl. She just can't accept reality." Even the doctors believed there was no hope. But Grace never listened. One Sunday morning, something unusual happened. Grace had arrived early, as always. The hospital hallway was quiet. Sunlight poured through the windows. She sat beside her mother and began telling one of their favorite childhood stories. Mom, remember when I tried to cook rice and burned the entire pot? She smiled softly. You laughed for 10 minutes. Then she held her mother's hand and whispered, Mom, if you can hear me, please wake up. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I miss you. The room was silent. The machines beeped steadily. Grace closed her eyes and began praying. God, you are the giver of life. Doctors may say no, but you have the final word. Just then, something moved. Grace froze. Her mother's finger twitched. Grace leaned closer. Mom? Another movement? Mrs. Peters' eyelids slowly fluttered. Grace gasped. Mom! Suddenly, the monitor began beeping faster. Mrs. Peters' eyes slowly opened. Grace screamed with joy. Nurse, doctor, please come. Doctors rushed into the room. Nurses stared in shock as Mrs. Peters slowly looked around the room. The doctor checked her pupils, her heartbeat, her breathing. Then he stepped back in disbelief. This is impossible. Grace was crying uncontrollably. Her mother's weak voice whispered, Grace? Grace held her tightly. Yes, Mom, I'm here. The doctor shook his head slowly. In all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this. He looked at Grace. Now I know there truly is a God. Later that day, Michael and Daniel rushed into the hospital room. When they saw their mother awake, they froze. Tears immediately filled their eyes. Mom! They fell to their knees beside the bed. Then they turned to Grace. Both of them were crying. We're sorry, Michael whispered. We didn't believe, Daniel said. Grace hugged them both. God never gave up on her. The three siblings stood there together, holding their mother's hands. And in that quiet hospital room, faith had won.